Voxel sculpting remains a very unique feature in 3D Coat among other digital sculpting applications. However, like any platform, it has its own unique trade-offs as well. One of those is artifacts that you might notice every once in a while when working in voxel mode. As you can see here, there's a little bit of chaff. There are a couple different ways you can resolve this. One is to smooth all. When working with voxels, smoothing typically has a dissolving type of effect. So very small artifacts like that, smooth all works a real treat. I'll do it one more time, and it's gone. However, there may be times where you decide you want to preserve details and smoothing all might be a problem. There are a couple different ways that you might approach that. One is if you have enough resolution on the model where it's extremely dense, then smoothing all probably will not dissolve your details that much, but it may be just enough to remove those small artifacts. This one I can zoom in and see the density. I can hit W to toggle on wireframe and see that it's relatively dense. So smoothing all may not dissolve the details that I want to preserve. But let's say we do not want to use smooth all. Maybe we're afraid that it will smooth sharp edges that we want to maintain. Let me undo a few times. Okay. I'll turn wireframe back off. So in that case, we may want to turn to smoothing with a brush. We could use any other brush and just hold down the Shift key to smooth on the fly. But you notice sometimes you may accidentally contact the model on the opposite side, and that may be a non-starter for you. In this case, it's on the back side, so I really don't mind that, but I just want to show a couple different options that you could choose from. For this one, let's say if it were out a little bit further away, it might be easier to just use the cutoff tool, which basically is a trimming tool. So for example, with this cutoff tool, I might use something like a freeform lasso, and you can just drag around it and it's going to cut it away. But in this case, this one is too close to the object. In extreme cases like that where, again, you don't want to smooth all, you're afraid that if you use the brush to smooth that you might accidentally contact the surface on the opposite side, then there is another alternative, and that is to switch to surface mode and basically have 3D Coat separate your objects. Let me undo to get this other artifact back. Now one thing is you could be a little bit careful when you smooth to minimize what it contacts. Let's try the smooth brush here, and I'll choose something like this. And you could even use something like a line tool here. I escape to drop that tool. Click and click. As you can see, there's very little, if any, contact on the surface behind those voxel artifacts. However, let's say we want to use this alternative method I was talking about, going to surface mode. Let's click on the V icon to switch to surface mode. Now in geometry, I can choose Objectify. Hit OK. All right, that's the main object. So I can see that's the little piece here. I can ghost that and see what these other little pieces are. They're probably very, very small. Yeah. So we can just go ahead and delete those. Before I conclude here, I want to show one additional example or additional tool that can be utilized in a more difficult scenario, meaning you do not want to affect any of the surfaces behind the objects we're trying to trim. We can do that by using the plane brush that will allow us to set a plane in 3D space to which 3D Coat will limit what we can actually cut or trim. Anything in between the plane and the camera, 3D Coat will trim or cut away. I can right mouse button click by default and it will set the plane on the object that I click on, as you can see here. So that's the default option for setting the plane, but you have different options here you can choose from. In this situation, that's probably the best one to use. We can also choose different orientations. Forward direction will be your camera, and then pick point and direction will set it by the normals of the surface. Okay, so let's go ahead and right click on this one. Here we have some options at the bottom as to moving this plane away once we have set it. So for example, I could set it on the very front of the surface, but move it away, which it's automatically doing right now, auto move forward. So it's automatically moving it back by this value. Okay, so I can see that it's not going to cut all the way through. It will up to this point, but I need to move it back manually. It's going to move by this increment level here. I can make that 3, hit OK. So I'm going to right click. If I don't have this set to anything, which I think by default it's set to 0, when I right click, you'll see it sets it right at the surface level. Okay, so I'm going to go back to 3, maybe even 5. I'll just to be kind of drastic there. Okay, I can use a brush, and I'm just going to use a shape draw mode. Let's go with a rectangular lasso. And I can move my brush further down and see where it's going to intersect. So I'll right click, move it down. Use the plus key on the number pad to move it back. Now let's try it again. You can right click. And after I've right clicked, I can use my 3D connection device to move around and see where it's going to intersect. Use my plus key to see how far back it's going to go. Let me switch to freeform lasso. Okay, so you can see it takes a little bit more effort, a little more time, but it cleans it up nicely. And again, this is for more extreme scenarios. Most of the time, it will be just a matter of using a smoothing brush or using Smooth All. So that's a quick look at cleaning up voxel artifacts in 3D Coat. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.